The city was already burning when the Romans understood what was happening. Flames climbed over roofs, temples and streets built to show Roman power. People ran through smoke while war cries rose outside the walls. At the center of the storm was a queen the empire had tried to break. Her name was Boudica, and her anger had become an army. She did not command one small tribe anymore. Thousands followed her, carrying spears, torches, and years of hatred. They had watched Rome take land, money, honor, and freedom. Now Roman cities were paying the price. But Boudica's greatest victory was also pulling her toward disaster. In this video, you will practice English through a true story from ancient Britain. The language will be clear, natural, and easy to follow. You will hear how one woman challenged the strongest empire of her age. You will also discover why her rebellion came so close to changing history. This is not only a story about war. It is a story about humiliation, revenge, courage, and the cost of freedom. To understand Boudica, we must enter a land that Rome had only recently conquered. Britain was green, cold, divided, and difficult to control. Roman armies had invaded Britain in the year 43. They arrived with disciplined soldiers, engineers, roads, and political promises. Some tribes fought, while others made agreements to survive. Rome often allowed friendly kings to keep their titles for a time. These rulers became client kings, protected by Rome, but never truly free. One such kingdom belonged to the Iceni in eastern Britain. Their lands were rich, open, and valuable to the empire. Their king was Prasutagus, the husband of Boudica. Prasutagus tried to protect his family through his final will. He named the Roman emperor and his own daughters as heirs. Perhaps he hoped Rome would accept the arrangement and leave the Iceni alone. But Roman officials did not respect his plan. They moved into the kingdom as if it already belonged to them. Property was taken, noble families were treated like slaves, and debts were demanded. The message was clear. The Iceni were partners only while Rome found them useful. Boudica protested, but the officials answered with violence. According to Tacitus, she was publicly beaten. Her 2 daughters were sexually assaulted. Boudica survived, but the woman who rose afterward was no longer asking for mercy. She began speaking to the Iceni and to neighboring tribes. Her pain was personal, yet almost every community had its own reason to hate Rome. Veterans had taken land from local families. Taxes and loans had created fear and dependence. Roman officials often acted as if British lives had little value. Boudica turned these separate wounds into one shared cause. She spoke of lost freedom and stolen dignity. Camulodunum, modern Colchester, was a symbol of Roman victory. Retired Roman soldiers lived there on land taken from local people. A great temple honored the Emperor Claudius, who had conquered Britain. To the Romans, the temple represented civilization and order. To many Britons, it represented humiliation. The city had weak defenses because its leaders did not expect a serious attack. When warnings arrived, Roman officials responded too slowly. They sent only a small number of poorly prepared men to help. Then Boudica's army appeared around the city. The rebels entered, destroyed buildings, and surrounded the temple. A Roman commander named Petilius Carialis marched to save Camulodunum. He brought soldiers from the 9th Legion and moved quickly toward the rebels. For Boudica, this was the first test against a real Roman force. Roman legions were famous for discipline, armor, and formation. But the rebels had numbers, speed, and the advantage of surprise. They attacked the legion before it could control the battlefield. The Roman infantry was overwhelmed. Cerealis escaped with cavalry, but much of his force was destroyed. The Roman governor, Suetonius Paulinus, had been far away in western Britain. He was attacking the island of Mona, a center of resistance and Druidic power. Then messengers reached him with news of the uprising. Camulodunum was gone, and part of a legion had been destroyed. Suetonius understood the danger immediately. He turned his army around and began a hard march east. His next decision would decide the fate of another city. That city was Londinium, the growing settlement that would become London. People begged the governor to stay and protect them. But Roman commanders were trained to think about the whole war, not one city. Suetonius ordered those who could travel to leave with his army. The old, the sick, and many others remained behind. Then the Roman soldiers marched away. Soon Boudica's forces reached Londinium. The settlement had no strong walls and almost no defenders. The rebels entered and set it on fire. Archaeologists have found a thick burned layer from this period beneath modern London. The destruction was so complete that ordinary life stopped. The revolt was now moving beyond revenge against officials and soldiers. Roman writers described terrible violence against civilians. They claimed the rebels killed without taking prisoners. Some details may have been shaped by Roman fear and propaganda, yet the destruction of the cities was real and massive. The next target was Verulamium, near modern St. Albans. It was another wealthy center connected to Roman rule. Boudica's army attacked and burned it as well. Boudica's followers were not a single professional army. They came from different tribes, families, and villages. Some were experienced warriors, but many were not. Women, children, carts, and animals traveled behind the fighting men. The movement looked less like a legion and more like a nation on the road. Its size inspired confidence, but size could become a weakness. Food was harder to organize, orders were harder to communicate, and discipline was uneven. Many believed the Romans were already defeated. Suetonius gathered the soldiers he could trust. His force was far smaller than Boudica's army. One legion commander refused to join him, a decision later remembered with shame. Still, Suetonius had trained infantry, experienced officers, and a clear plan. He chose a narrow battlefield with woods behind the Roman line. The exact location remains unknown, but it was probably near a major Roman road. The narrow ground protected his sides from being surrounded. It also forced the huge rebel army into a crowded front. Roman historians give Boudica a powerful speech before the battle. They say she rode in a chariot with her daughters beside her. She reminded the army of her beaten body and her children's suffering. She presented the fight as a choice between freedom and slavery. The exact words were almost certainly created by Roman writers, but the emotion behind them fits the rebellion. Across the field, Suetonius also spoke to his soldiers. He told them not to fear the noise or the enemy's numbers. The Britons moved forward across the narrow field. Their shouting filled the air as the Romans waited. Then Roman soldiers threw heavy javelins into the crowded front ranks. The first wave broke under the attack. Before the rebels could recover, the Roman infantry advanced. They formed tight wedge shapes and pushed into the mass before them. Roman shields protected the line, while short swords worked at close distance. The rebels had courage, but courage could not create space on the crowded ground. Men behind them continued pushing forward. Men in front could not move freely or use long weapons well. Boudica's army began to retreat, but the wagons and families behind them blocked the escape. The crowd pressed backward into its own camp. Warriors, civilians, carts, and animals became trapped together. The Roman soldiers kept their formation and continued the attack. Ancient writers give enormous numbers for the dead. Those numbers may be exaggerated, but the defeat was clearly devastating. The rebellion's strength had turned into its weakness. The sources do not agree about what happened to Boudica next. Tacitus says she ended her own life with poison. Cassius Dio says she became ill and died. No confirmed grave has ever been found. Her daughters also vanish from the record. This silence has allowed legend to grow around her final days. Some later stories placed her burial beneath London landmarks. There is no solid evidence for those claims. After the victory, Rome had to decide how to control Britain. Suetonius continued harsh operations against communities linked to the revolt. But Roman leaders feared that too much punishment could create another uprising. The governor was eventually replaced. Roman policy became more careful for a time. The destroyed cities were rebuilt. Londinium returned and slowly became the most important Roman city in Britain. Roads, forts, farms, baths, and markets spread across the province. For many centuries, Boudica was not the central hero she is today. Interest in her story grew again during the English Renaissance. Later writers changed her name into forms such as Boudica. In the 19th century, she became closely linked with Queen Victoria's Britain. Artists showed her as a noble warrior defending the nation. A famous statue placed her in a chariot near the Houses of Parliament. The image was powerful, but also deeply ironic. Victorian Britain was itself the center of a great empire. Almost everything written about the revolt comes from Roman authors. Tacitus was born close to the time of the rebellion. His father-in-law later served in Britain, which may have given him useful information. Cassius Dio wrote much later and included dramatic details. Neither writer recorded Boudica's own voice. We do not know her exact age, appearance, or the names of her daughters. Even the location of the final battle is uncertain. Archaeology confirms destruction in important places, especially London and Colchester. Boudica did not defeat Rome, and she did not create a united British nation. Her alliance was born from a specific crisis in a divided land. Still, she achieved something extraordinary. She turned private suffering into a revolt that shook an empire. She destroyed Roman centers and defeated part of a legion. For a brief moment, Rome's future in Britain looked uncertain. Her rebellion also shows the danger of rule without respect. The Romans had military power, but their abuse created the enemy they feared. Nearly 2,000 years later, Boudica still rides through the imagination. We see the queen with red hair, a chariot, and a burning sky. But the strongest part of her story is not the legend. It is the moment when a person treated as powerless refused to remain silent. Rome took her kingdom, attacked her family, and expected obedience. Instead, it created one of the greatest rebellions in British history. Boudica's cities fell. Her army was destroyed. and her grave was forgotten. Yet the empire that defeated her is gone too. Her name survived because her question survived. How much can power take before fear becomes resistance?